Guys, welcome back to another episode of a SONAX Detail. Today we've got an E90 here. It's an old 2005 E90 pre-facelift 323. It's had CC36 on it for about 3 years now. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you guys what happens when we get to the very end of our ceramic coating time, and then how we can deal with that ceramic coating and what we can do to now refresh it and put a new ceramic coating over the top. So because this car stands outside 99% of its life, it's had a pretty hard time. So it's got some like surface sort of scratches and stuff like that, a bit of paint dulling. But because the CC36 is such a flexible coating and stuff like that, we can actually quite easily get rid of the remains that are left on there now, polish the paint up to a very nice, new, fresh level, and then just put a nice new ceramic coating back over the top. So I'm going to show you guys how we can run through that process. It's fairly straightforward. We'll start with claying the whole car, and I'll show you guys some of the defects that we have in the paint which we can get rid of before we put a new ceramic coating on. So upon closer inspection to the paint has like dulled off a bit. One of the biggest things that I notice is because this car stands in a city environment, it's actually picked up a lot of contamination in the paint. So just having a feel of the paint with the back of your hand running along there, it quite literally feels like sandpaper. So the first thing we need to do is we need to give it a really, really good clay. The way I do it is I use the green clear glass to lubricate the panels. On a dual action machine, I use our clay disc. With that clay disc, it absolutely pulls out all of those contaminants really effortlessly, so I can clay this entire car in under 10 minutes. A clay bar is handy for other things like getting into like smaller areas, but on these big flat panels, I always go with a clay disc just for efficiency. As a professional, you need to get these cars done in a short matter of time, and that's why that's usually my choice of product to use for this sort of application. This is the clay lube I'll be using, and this is the clay disc I'll be using. Start by giving your panel a nice, good spray down with the clear glass. We definitely want to have a fair bit of lubrication on the panel just to make sure the clay disc never runs dry. That's the first thing to kill your clay disc if you run it dry. And also remember, if you have a brand new clay disc, start it on the glass because there's a protective layer over the clay which needs to be buzzed off before you go into the paint. However, if you have used your clay disc before, there's no need to do that. So super easy. We've now given that a nice quick coat of clear glass, and it's got a fairly long flash time, this glass cleaner, so we don't have to be super quick, but we probably want to get onto it. Run your machine at probably a fairly low speed, like around 2 to 3 on a flex like this is ideal. And I got it just even one-handedly on this dual action like this. Remember when you're claying to not run it across these sort of edges up here, as the clay disc can be fairly abrasive and we don't really want to minimize our clear coat on those high points or anything like that. So I usually run the clay disc up to the line, and then afterwards I run it past the line, just never on top of the line as such. And the beauty of using the clear glass is that the cleanup is always just fantastic. So what you do is you just grab your drying towel, run the drying towel over the top of where you just clayed, and all the residue is gone, and whatever's left over is going to flash off because it's a glass cleaner. So now that we've removed all contaminants from this area, you can run your hand back over it, and it's just pretty much silky smooth already, and this is now ready for polishing. So this step we're going to repeat for the entire vehicle, and then we're ready to get into the actual paint correction of side of things. So guys, we've just finished claying the entire car, so we're back to the bonnet again. So what we're going to do for our first step is we're going to quickly buzz over with ultimate cut on a rotary with a wool pad in the name of efficiency. So we're going to give it a nice quick cut back, get rid of any of the leftover ceramic that's left on the bonnet, and after that we'll finish it off with the dual action on a medium pad. So first step, ultimate cut wool pad with a rotary. And the second step will be perfect finish on a dual action. Both processes will happen in the same manner, so we'll start slow and finish off fast. Because they are diminishing abrasives, that's the best polishing technique to get the most out of these compounds. So let's get into it, guys. So the awesome thing about these pads is that it's actually lamb wool woven to a Velcro backing plate. So there's not actually any lamb leather or anything at the back of this, because that quite often will shrink and it won't be able to dissipate the heat as much as that. So with this combination of lamb wool being woven to the Velcro backing pad, you can have a much more efficient cutting process than if you had a leather behind it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna nicely prime the pad before we start, give it a bit of extra compound, and that's what we need to do to start out with. So let's start on a low speed, work the compound for a while, and then speed up. The way I spread the compound out on the panel is by just slowly working the machine up and down. I do it that way to avoid any splatter. So if I was to dot the machine around, by the time the machine would run over it, it would flick the compound onto places that I don't want it to be. So this technique has worked quite well for me. You see we've got a fairly mess-free process happening here as we're spreading out the compound. So we've given this a really good hardcore cutback with the rotary on this side of the bonnet. So we're just gonna wipe off any residue, and we'll be left with some mild sort of holograms, which is no problems at all, because that's what we're gonna be running the dual action over the panel for again. The dual action with the perfect finish is gonna take out those holograms with no dramas at all, and that's when we'll get our perfect clarity back out of the paint and the really high gloss that we want to achieve. So I find quite often nowadays people will be cutting the bonnet or cutting the panels for a really long time with a dual action machine, and it just takes too long, you know. So people should really get around using a rotary, because you can get a really heavy cutback in a very low amount of time. It just takes a little bit more skill. So guys, time for the second step. Medium pad, perfect finish, dual action machine, can't go wrong. This is probably the easiest polishing you'll ever find you'll have to do. There's practically nothing that can go wrong here. And you'll just get an awesome high gloss with no fillers, no silicone, nothing. And from this step onwards, you're perfectly prepped to ceramic coat the car. So again, start at low speed, then once it's broken down a little bit, the particle size in the polish, then we'll bring up the speed, work it until until the abrasive is completely pretty much diminished, and then we'll wipe it off, and it's a super easy wipe off as well. Just to demo how easy of a wipe off it is, have a look at this. Like, there's no sticky compound or anything like that. You just wipe it straight off, no dramas at all, and you're left with the really nice high gloss finish. Doesn't have any waxes in it or anything like that. Now time to repeat this step for the rest of the car. So whilst we're at the front, let's take care of these well-weathered headlights. So no dramas, we've got a kit for it. Really quickly allows you to get these headlights looking nearly like brand new. One of the key things about that headlight kit is that there's a sealant involved. So you do not want to actually clear coat over these headlights, because that can cause major implications with these plastic lenses. Quite often we've seen cracking of those lenses and stuff like that. And once that happens, there's nothing that's going to bring you back from that. Our kit is OSRAM approved. So once you've done a restoration of it, you're going to regain full light capability, and you're not going to do anything that's going to detrimentally damage the headlight. But because in previous videos we've shown you guys how to do this headlight restoration, we're just going to put a link down here in the description where you can check it out. But now we're just going to quickly fast forward, run you through how this headlight restoration is done right now. we just finished the paint correction on this vehicle, and now it's time to move on to the ceramic coating. So our last step of the polish was obviously perfect finish, which is a good finishing compound to use, as there's no fillers in there or anything like that. But just as a precautionary wipe over to make sure there's no contaminants, we're going to be using Prepare on a microfiber. So what we do is we'll give us a nice sort of coating like this, then go onto the panel, give it a good wipe down. What I like to do is I do a wipe on, wipe off type procedure, and I'll go to flip the microfiber, wipe over it one more time, and do this for the entire vehicle to make sure there are no contaminants and the ceramic coating can bond really well to the panels. So at this point, we're going to apply the CC1 to the prepped surface. So what we're going to start out by doing is liberally prime our application pad, put about sort of between 6 to 8 dots worth of CC1 on the surface, and that'll be enough to prime it. And at this point, same as any ceramic coating, applied in a crosshatch pattern. There we go. I like to work up to body lines just so you know which area you've already done and which area you'll need to do afterwards. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work up to this body line here on the bonnet, and I'm probably going to do about a quarter of a bonnet at a time. Amazing thing with this applicator pad is how level the ceramic coating is actually applied before we even have to start wiping it, rather than having to waste ceramic coating whilst applying. Now that the ceramic is applied to the bonnet, we're going to wait about 3 to 4 minutes and then completely level it off. I like to use a 2-towel technique, but I'm going to show you guys how that works in a sec. So 3 to 4 minutes has passed now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have microfiber A and microfiber B. So with A, I'll do my initial wipe, and then with B, I'll go over it again just to make sure there's no leftovers on the bonnet. I like to wipe it in straight motions. These coating towels are amazing for the job because they really pick up the ceramic leftovers that are on the bonnet very nicely and minimize the chance of there being any high spots. Now that that's off, we'll grab our second microfiber just for reassurance, wipe over the entire panel one more time. And that's as easy as the process is. You just need to repeat that for the rest of the vehicle, and that's all you need to do to ceramic coat your car with CC1. Alright guys, well that concludes how you can refresh your ceramic coating after 3 years. Have a look at the results.